The Strait of Hormuz, the most critical choke point of global energy flow, the backbone of the world's oil trade. Every day, approximately 20 million barrels of crude oil pass through this narrow maritime corridor. But now, this route is under serious threat. This time, the force stepping onto the stage is not the usual aircraft carriers or high-altitude bombardments. The United States is taking the game to a different level. One of the sharpest elements of its strategic rapid reaction doctrine, the 82nd Airborne Division, known as the Global Response Force, is preparing to deploy directly into the hot zone by parachute. This is not a conventional force movement. This is an advanced projection of power aimed at seizing critical areas through airborne operations. These units infiltrate enemy lines, establish an airhead, and create an opening for the main forces from within. In other words, this move is not merely a deployment, it is the opening act of an operation. And now the real question is this: is the United States merely ensuring deterrence in Hormuz, or is it initiating an operation to take de facto control of the field? This is not a claim. According to a report by the Associated Press based on U.S. Department of Defense sources, Washington has decided to deploy at least 1,000 troops from the 82nd Airborne Division to the Middle East. This unit is known as one of the U.S. military's highest readiness rapid reaction elements and is positioned as the first force deployed into the field during sudden crises. The report primarily emphasizes the escalating tension in the region, particularly the increasing security risks along the Hormuz line. This development is, in fact, part of a broader military buildup. The United States has been constructing a multi-layered force structure along the Gulf line for quite some time. Moving beyond traditional deterrence provided by naval forces, an operational framework is being formed in which air and ground elements are fully integrated. Aircraft carrier strike groups, guided missile destroyers, and forward air bases already stationed in the region are now evolving, with this new deployment, into a structure capable of direct intervention on the ground. This indicates that the U.S. is preparing not only to protect maritime traffic, but also, if necessary, to physically control critical points. The Hormuz line is not merely a transit route. It is one of the most sensitive nodes in the global energy chain. Any threat to this line creates a wide-ranging impact, from oil prices to logistical networks. For this reason, the U.S. military presence in the region is not only a military strategy, but also part of an economic security framework. The continuity of energy flow is directly tied to the stability of the global system. The latest deployment shows that this strategy has entered a new phase. It is no longer just about remote deterrence. The approach of establishing control by physically entering the field is coming to the forefront. This operation is the field manifestation of the multi-domain warfare concept. This structure, in which naval, air, and ground elements are used simultaneously and in coordination, aims to establish rapid superiority, especially in narrow and high-risk areas. Therefore, what we are witnessing here is not a simple decision to send troops. This is a military positioning that could directly affect the balance of power in the region and reshape the understanding of control on the ground. These developments could affect not just the region, but the global system. The 82nd Airborne Division is not merely a fast-moving unit. It is designed as the sharpest edge of modern American war doctrine. When this unit deploys, it does not act alone. Alongside it, a much larger, unseen force is always in motion. That is why, to understand this operation, one must look not only at the soldiers descending by parachute, but at the massive military system behind them. Everything begins in the sky. The C-17 Globemaster III and C-130 Hercules aircraft are not just transport platforms. They are the elements that press the start button of an operation. Night or day makes no difference. When the cargo doors open, hundreds of parachutes fill the sky at once. This moment is the silent beginning of a war. Because this descent is not merely a deployment of troops, it is the moment when the fate of a region begins to change. Before this drop is even completed, other actors take the stage. The U.S. naval power deployed in the region forms the unseen but decisive backbone of the operation. In particular, vessels such as the USS Tripoli LHA-7 and the USS Abraham Lincoln CVN-72 are not merely platforms positioned at sea. They are mobile forward operating bases that can transform into the center of the battlefield when required. Ships like USS Tripoli, with their embarked F-35B short takeoff and vertical landing aircraft, can provide rapid and flexible air superiority in coastal areas. At the same time, they can transport Marines, armored elements, and helicopter units to the field, offering a multi-layered amphibious capability. This means that an operation initiated at sea can be transferred onto land within hours. On the other hand, nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, like USS Abraham Lincoln, operate almost like an air force on their own. With F/A-18 Super Hornet fighter jets, electronic warfare platforms, and early warning aircraft on board, they can take control of the airspace across hundreds of kilometers. Aircraft launched from these carriers do not merely strike targets, they also gather intelligence, monitor the airspace, and expand the maneuvering space of ground forces. In this way, the sky is brought under control from the very first moment of the operation. Another critical component complementing this naval power is guided missile destroyers and cruisers. Equipped with the Aegis combat system, these ships can track both air and naval threats simultaneously. With long-range Tomahawk cruise missiles, they can conduct precision strikes on targets hundreds of kilometers away. At the same time, they create an air defense umbrella, protecting both carrier groups and the forces deployed on the ground. These systems secure not only the offensive dimension of the operation, but also its defensive layer. And beneath all this movement lies another crucial yet invisible element: submarines. Moving silently, these platforms detect enemy elements, carry out sudden and devastating strikes when necessary, and create a constant pressure factor. Their presence is rarely seen, but always felt. This severely restricts the maneuverability of the opposing side. When all these elements come together, the picture becomes clear. This naval power is not merely a supporting structure. It is a massive force that ensures operational security, shapes the battle space, and stands behind the units deployed on the ground. Before airborne troops even touch the ground, this system is already in motion. The sky has been secured, the sea line has been stabilized, and the operational area has been methodically prepared. That is why this naval power is not just support. It is both a steel shield, ensuring the success of the airborne operation, and an invisible fist. The moment airborne troops make contact with the ground, the operation enters its second phase. At this point, helicopters begin to dominate the field. AH-64 Apache attack helicopters become the hunters of the battlefield. With their sensors, they detect targets, strike with pinpoint accuracy, and ensure that no movement remains uncontrolled. UH-60 Black Hawk helicopters, on the other hand, are the veins of this system. They are in constant motion, transporting troops, evacuating casualties, and inserting new elements when needed. This air traffic determines the tempo of the operation and creates continuous pressure on the ground. Once on the ground, speed gives way to the expansion of control. Humvee vehicles emerge as the mobile elements that quickly envelop the area. These vehicles do not merely provide transportation, they enable the expansion of presence on the ground. Units dispersing in different directions rapidly cover a wide area, connecting critical points to one another. This is not a chaotic advance, it is a planned and coordinated expansion. Individual equipment forms the most fundamental yet critical layer of this structure. UN-4A1 rifles act as a standard force multiplier in the hands of every soldier. Javelin systems provide a decisive response to armored threats in the field. Stinger systems establish a security umbrella against aerial threats. These weapons do not function in isolation. They gain meaning when used together. Each is designed to counter a specific threat, but in the field they operate as a unified whole. When all these elements merge, what emerges is not merely a rapid reaction force, but a multi-layered and integrated war machine. This system, which begins in the sky, is supported by the sea, and expands on land, clearly demonstrates how modern warfare is conducted. This is not simply about sending power to a point, it is about establishing a structure capable of fully controlling that point. And when such a structure is activated in a narrow, sensitive, and globally critical region like the Strait of Hormuz, the consequences are not only military, but also geopolitical. Because a deployment of this scale does not just shape the battlefield, it rewrites the rules of the game. So now, the real question remains: is what we are witnessing truly just a step of deterrence? Or is the opening act of a much larger operation unfolding? Throughout history, the deployment of a high-readiness force like the 82nd Airborne Division has often signaled the crossing of critical thresholds. The current situation along the Hormuz line appears to be a pivotal moment. Control over this region, the heart of global energy flow, is not only a military matter, but also a decisive factor in global power balance. Is the United States attempting to maintain equilibrium in this region, or is it altering the existing rules? What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you don't want to miss analyses like these, don't forget to subscribe to Crossfire Brief. The discussions here not only shape a war, but also influence the world's direction. Thank you for watching.